Against the Tide of Hatred by Yuri Singidas. It is love in the midst of Gaza against all odds. Meet Dr. Fatima Bashar. She had always known she was meant to heal, even when the world around her seemed intent on destruction. At 33, she was one of the finest surgeons at Al-Ahli Arab Baptist Hospital in Gaza, a place where hope flickered dimly amid the chaos of war. She had spent years training at Beth Israel Hospital in Manhattan, perfecting the art of saving lives. It was there, in the brightly lit corridors of the New York hospital, that she met Dr. Elijah Cohen, an ambitious and kind-hearted Israeli doctor, the sharp mind and an infectious laugh. Despite the history between their people, their friendship had come easily. They bonded over grueling surgeries, late-night coffee runs, and a shared belief in medicine's ability to transcend politics. But their paths had diverged. Fatima returned to Gaza in 2022, determined to serve her people, while Elijah joined the Israeli army as a military surgeon, believing he could make a difference from within. Then came October 7, 2023. Elijah had taken a rare break to attend the Nova Music Festival with friends, a brief respite from the heaviness of his work. When Hamas launched its attack, he was among those abducted and taken back to Gaza. Wounded and barely conscious, he was dragged into the tunnels beneath the city where he lay in darkness, his life hanging by a thread. Fatima was in the middle of treating a young boy with shrapnel wounds when armed men arrived at the hospital. They needed a doctor, someone with skill, someone who could keep an Israeli prisoner alive. They blindfolded her and took her underground. When the blindfold was ripped away, she gasped. It was Elijah.
Elijah, is that you?
Bloodied and weak, his face barely recognizable, but still him. The friend she had once laughed with, debated with, the man whose kindness had always set him apart.
Yes, Fatima. Thank God, it's you. I feel safe now.
Even in pain, he managed to make her smile. The realization shook her. She swallowed back her panic and got to work. His injuries were severe: internal bleeding, a fractured rib, and a deep gash along his thigh. She did everything she could in the dim, suffocating space, her hands steady even as her mind raced. When she was done, she turned to the Hamas commander. "He won't survive down here," she said, her voice firm. "He needs the hospital." To her surprise, they agreed, on one condition: he would be guarded at all times. Back at Al-Ahli, Fatima worked tirelessly to keep Elijah alive. As the war raged above them, she became his only link to the outside world. They spoke in hushed tones between treatments, their conversations tiptoeing around the unspeakable horrors unfolding around them. Their intimacy grew.
Why did you save me?
Because I don't get to choose who lives and who dies. I just fight for life.
Then the airstrikes came. Fatima barely had time to process the news. Her family gone. A single Israeli bomb had flattened her childhood home, taking her parents, her brothers, her niece. She felt something inside her break. And yet, when she entered Elijah's room that night, she saw the grief in his eyes too. He hadn't pulled the trigger, but his people had. He hadn't given the orders, but his uniform bore their emblem. For the first time, war was not a faceless enemy. It was them, both of them, standing on opposite sides of the devastation. And still, when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. Love was not supposed to grow here, not in a war zone, not between two people whose nations had taught them to hate each other, but it did. Slowly, painfully, defiantly. When the time came, Fatima knew what she had to do. She had to get Elijah out. With quiet determination, she orchestrated his escape, but Elijah refused to leave without her.
We go together.
They crossed into Israel under the cover of night, surviving checkpoints and suspicion, desperation their only fuel. When they arrived at Elijah's family home, the reality of their love met its fiercest test. His parents were conservatives, their grief over the war carving their hearts into stone. They saw Fatima not as a woman, not as their son's love, but as an enemy. The whispers followed her everywhere: terrorist, murderer, infiltrator. She had saved their son's life, yet they could not see past their own pain. In the end, it was Elijah who made the decision.
This isn't home. Let's go back to New York. Let's start over.
So they did. They married in a quiet ceremony in Manhattan where the war could not reach them. And yet, it never truly left them. They carried it in the way they flinched at loud noises, in the nightmares that haunted their sleep, in the way strangers still asked, "How can you love each other?" But they also carried something else, a lesson, a truth. That love was not blind, it saw everything, the wounds, the scars, the history, and still it chose to exist. Against all odds, against the tide of hatred, it remained. And that was enough.